Welcome to Parliament House. Tonight we'll hear the Leader of the Opposition give his reply to the federal budget in the House of Representatives. On Tuesday, Treasurer Jim Chalmers unveiled sweeping changes breaking election promises by overhauling negative gearing, capital gains tax and family trusts. Labor argues the changes will redistribute wealth from old to young, recasting Australia's intergenerational bargain. The Coalition has already signalled it will seek to repeal the government's tax reforms. Tonight, Angus Taylor lays out his alternative vision with a plan to limit bracket creep, cut migration and tighten access to welfare. Shortly, Angus Taylor will join me in the studio, but as we can see, the members in the chamber are waiting for him to take his position at the dispatch box. It's a hugely consequential night, obviously, for Angus Taylor, having taken the leadership from Susan Lee. This is his moment to demonstrate to the country, to the Liberal voters, many of whom have obviously left the Liberal Party for now, to support One Nation, but he also needs to demonstrate to his colleagues sitting behind him that he has what it takes to take it to the Labor government. Let's now hear from Angus Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To Australians watching, thank you for your time. Tonight, I want to tell you about my vision for a fairer, freer and better Australia for all. An Australia where life is affordable. An Australia where we have cheap and abundant energy. An Australia where industries thrive and businesses boom. An Australia where we innovate, make and build things of ambition and farm, mine and drill with determination. Yeah. An Australia where a single income earner on an ordinary wage has enough for a home deposit and to pay off a mortgage steadily over time. An Australia where a mum or dad can afford to take time away from work to do the most worthwhile thing in life, raise a child. Yeah. An Australia where those we welcome to our shores are all determined to embrace our values, to work hard, to contribute to this nation, to become Australian. An Australia where we have confidence in our nation's future. An Australia where we have hope and optimism. This isn't the Australia we know today. But we have known it, and we can know it again. Yeah. We can restore our standard of living, and we can protect our way of life. Now, that starts by fighting against the assault on aspiration at the heart of Labor's budget. Yeah. Labor is locking out young Australians from the opportunities afforded to older Australians to build wealth and prosperity and to get ahead. Yeah. This Prime Minister is one of many Australians who has benefited from these opportunities. Now he's pulling up the ladder of opportunity for the next generation. Not only by whacking higher taxes on housing, but also on their savings, investments and small businesses. When government whacks a tax on something, you get less of it. Less housing, less savings, less investment and less small business for the next generation. Labor's budget isn't intergenerational fairness, it's intergenerational fraud. Yeah. Their budget is also an attack on every Australian. As Labor's own budget papers state, its tax hikes will reduce the number of houses available for young Australians to buy or to rent. Labor's negative gearing changes will hand over housing investment to multinationals and foreign pension funds. Labor's increase to the capital gains tax will discourage the investment Australia needs to grow. And Labor's small business tax will punish small and family businesses that are already working harder than ever and collapsing at record rates. The Treasurer's higher taxes aren't economic reform. They're an assault on aspiration. Yes. They're an attack on the wealth creation that benefits all. They will crush the reward for hard work spirit that underpins our nation's success. And so the Coalition will fight like hell to prevent Labor's toxic taxes from becoming law. But if they do, I commit that a coalition government I lead will repeal them. Now, there's a simple reason why Labor has broken its core election promises. This incompetent government has lost control of its spending. When Labor runs out of its money, it comes after yours. Intergenerational theft isn't caused by older Australians. It's been caused by the Albanese government. Labor's reckless spending will soon see our country with $1 trillion of debt. The only way to get debt down is to throw out this bad government. Now, to know a fairer, freer and better Australia, we also need something that's been missing for too long, and that's honesty. Honesty about what's holding Australia back and leaving Australians behind. First, mass migration is changing Australia for the worse. The number of people coming in far exceeds the number of houses built. Consequently, the great Australian dream of home ownership is vanishing for old and new Australians alike. Across its 2 terms, Labor will have brought in 2 million people. That includes 90,000 more than planned in the next 2 years. By inviting in too many people too quickly, we've also seen some come with the wrong values. People who don't want to join and embrace Australia, but people who want to change Australia to suit them. We saw this with the Bondi tragedy, inspired by radical and violent Islam. Second, prioritising net zero and emissions reduction above all else has seen cheap, always-on power dismissed for expensive, sometimes-on, industrial-scale renewables, mainly sourced from offshore. Power prices have soared, causing households to struggle, businesses to close, and industries to move offshore. Far from a future made in Australia, our future is being made abroad. Australians have been fed the lie that our economy can function on solar, wind and batteries alone. But the truth is, fossil fuels continue to drive our economy and our prosperity. In this budget alone, Labor has $18 billion in new net zero spending. Labor's net zero obsession is driving up inflation and destroying our economy. And that's why net zero must go. Yeah. Third, all Australians prosper from having access to international markets. But blind faith in globalisation has hollowed out our vital industries and made our country vulnerable. We're too dependent on other countries for critical supplies for jet fuel, diesel and fertiliser. And yet we have an abundance of resources beneath our feet. We could be self-sufficient and reindustrialise in key areas if we stop locking up our resources and turbocharged digging and drilling. Yeah. Fourth, during the pandemic, many Australians were reliant on government. But that crisis fed the mistaken belief that bigger government is the solution to every problem. Anthony Albanese promised that you would be better off under a big Labor government. But big government hasn't led to better government or Australians being better off. Government-led housing programs have seen 30,000 fewer homes built each year. 30,000 fewer each year. Government-led industry policy has seen billions wasted on pie-in-the-sky schemes like green hydrogen. Government-led childcare for all has caused costs to rise by 14%. And government-led energy policy and pushing out gas and coal generation has caused power prices to surge by 40%. Labor's reckless spending has caused inflation to soar. Contrary to Labor's spin, inflation was rising long before the conflict in Iran. Under Labor, interest rates have gone up 15 times. And Australia has experienced the worst collapse in living standards in the developed world. Moreover, under Labor, economic growth is an illusion. Every single dollar of growth has been due to population growth, mostly immigration. Every single dollar. Labor remains committed to the follies of mass migration, net zero, locking up our resources and big government. We need to reject these bad ideas to bring about a fairer, freer and better Australia. Yeah. Now, my life has taken me from the family farm, sheep yards and shearing shed, to small business, to factory floors, to boardrooms, to this parliament. I've seen everyday Aussie men and women who make, build, fix, create, contribute and care. And I've seen big government, big unions and big business who direct, influence, accumulate power and seek to control the lives of others. Our nation is at its very best when everyday Aussies are empowered. Yeah. My ambition for this country is to revive the freedom that Australians have lost under Labor. Not a government-directed economy, a free enterprise economy. Not bigger government, but better government. Better government that gets the big things right, gets off Australians' backs and puts its faith back in you. To that end, a coalition government under my leadership will axe Labor's toxic taxes, end Labor's mass immigration and scrap Labor's net zero policies. Yeah. When we restore and expand our choices, we can begin to restore our standard of living and protect our way of life. Now, Mr Speaker, to lower inflation, interest rates and the cost of living, we must reduce government spending. Labor has driven it to a 40-year high outside of the pandemic. We will work with the government to make its National Disability Insurance Scheme sustainable. Yet Labor lacks any real resolve to rein in its reckless ways. And unlike Labor, the coalition will get spending under control and save billions. We will abolish Labor's climate bureaucracy, its net zero agency, its power lines to nowhere and its tax on the family car and ute. Yeah. We will end tax breaks for electric vehicles, which are overwhelmingly going to high-income Australians. We'll terminate Labor's corporate welfare, like sending money to foreign tech companies that don't deliver. We'll scrap Labor's housing bureaucracy, the ineffective Housing Australia Future Fund and its build-to-rent tax breaks for multinationals. We'll remove Labor's handouts for non-citizens. Many Australians would be surprised to learn that non-citizens are eligible for welfare in this country. We've already announced that the first home buyer 5% deposit scheme will be reserved for Australian citizens only. Yeah. That's because Labor has allowed some 50,000 non-citizens to access this scheme. Moreover, this government is funding welfare for non-citizens as soon as they arrive on our soil. Yet it has cut the private health insurance rebate for Australians over 65 and slashed $600 million for our veterans. Labor puts Australians second, whereas the coalition will always put Australians first. Yeah. Tonight, I announced that a coalition government will reserve the NDIS and 17 different welfare programs, including JobSeeker, Youth Allowance and the Family Tax Benefit, for Australian citizens only and save taxpayers billions. My message is this. If you commit to Australia, Australia will commit to you. After all, the taxes paid by hard-working Australians should support Australians. Australians know that revenue from booming iron ore, gas and coal prices go a long way. For instance, revenues can help to build more houses and stronger communities, as well as the long-term infrastructure in cities and regions that we need, like the Inland Rail that's been axed by Labor. Revenues can help to pay down debt too. Since Labor came to office, they've received almost $500 billion in commodity revenue upgrades, mostly driven by higher resource prices. This year alone, iron ore prices have averaged more than $100 a tonne US, but this budget assumes they return just $60 a tonne. Instead of paying down debt and building our nation, Labor has squandered resource profits with its self-indulgent spending. In contrast, the Coalition will not neglect our responsibility to our children and grandchildren. Where resource tax revenues are higher than forecast, we will bank 80 cents in every dollar into our Future Generation Fund. Yeah. This fund will help to pay down Labor's $1 trillion of debt. Yeah. It will help to invest in nation-building infrastructure. 25% of funding will be for our regions that have been neglected by Labor. Yeah. Regions that are home to the natural resources we all benefit from. Mr. Speaker, in my career I've worked across agriculture, energy, resources and infrastructure sectors. I've helped small and large businesses to grow. I know what makes an economy tick and what Australia needs to grow and to thrive. Government doesn't grow the economy, private enterprise does. Yeah. Tonight, I begin to outline how the Coalition will restore Australian prosperity. It starts with driving investment. Investment lifts the economy's speed limit. It drives up jobs, real wages and real income. And it strengthens the budget to pay for the safety net and to pay down debt. Investment is a vote of confidence in our country with compounding benefits. For example, when a builder invests in a ute, he can do more jobs, take on a new apprentice, grow his business and service more of his community. To lift confidence in our country and encourage business investment, tonight I announce an important down payment, the first of many. We will allow any business with a turnover of less than $10 million to immediately deduct assets of up to $50,000 on a permanent basis. Yeah. To boost investment, we also need to free the economy from the government's chains. Laws are too complex and obstruct enterprise. A coalition government will rewrite and simplify the legislative rulebook, including the Corporations Act, Tax Act, Competition Act, National Construction Code and Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. Yeah. Take the Construction Code as one example. Labor has expanded it to more than 2,000 pages. The code's thousands of rules add tens of thousands of dollars to new housing bills. We want the code to be closer to 200 pages. And we will go further. Regulatory bodies created by government set rules and enforce laws, and that's important. But under Labor, these regulators have become bigger, more powerful and overbearing. They're regulating for regulation's sake. They need to get out of the way. Yeah. A coalition government will impose new responsibilities on regulators by law. will require regulators to act in a way that encourages competition, nurtures investment, increases productivity, boosts wages and grows the economy. The Coalition will also abolish Labor's great big carbon tax, the so-called safeguard mechanism. This tax jacks up the price on essential building materials like steel, cement and glass, driving up the cost of a new home. It also undermines investment in key industries and hastens them going offshore. Indeed, we'll abolish Labor's crippling net zero carbon taxes wherever we find them, on mining, manufacturing, electricity, vehicles and imports. Now, just as I want more investment in Australia, I want Australians to keep more of their income. If you're feeling poorer under this government, it's because you are. Labor is stealing from you with inflation. The Treasurer says inflation will reach 5% next month. People see Labor's inflation steal from them in higher grocery prices, power bills, mortgage repayments and other cost of living expenses. But Labor is stealing from Australians in another way, year after year, without new laws, without an election and without you even noticing until you look at your bank account. When your wages rise just to keep up with inflation, you're no better off. But you pay higher taxes as though you are better off. More of your income goes into a higher tax bracket. This is bracket creep. And it's why you feel poorer. The higher Labor's inflation goes and the longer it lasts, the more the government takes from you. This is a stealth raid on Australians working hard to get ahead. Labor's promising that your real wages will finally go up, but Labor's plan is to tax away all of workers' real wage gains. Living standards go nowhere. A typical worker on $70,000 a year will see their entire real wage gains taxed away. The worst thing about this tax is that it keeps going up and keeps taking more each year forever. Under a coalition government I lead, this will end. Yeah. Tonight, I announce our tax-back guarantee. From 2028-29, we will index the bottom two income tax thresholds to inflation. Yeah. That will fully protect 85% of income earners with relief of around $2.50 in year one for a typical worker, growing to more than $1,000 a year in year four. From 2031-32, we will index the top two tax thresholds as well. That will fully protect all income earners from inflation. Yeah. This is generational tax reform. Yeah. It's fair, it's simple and it's honest. It will back Australians to work hard, take risks, invest in their future and invest in our country's future. It will force government to respect your money. Any government that wants to tax Australians more should have the courage to front up and take that tax increase to an election. Yeah. Under Labor, Australians work harder, pay more and fall behind. Under the Coalition, Australians will be rewarded, keep more and get ahead. Yeah. From my first day as opposition leader, I said I wanted to re-establish home ownership as the centrepiece of the Australian dream. My goal is more houses for Australians and a fairer go for young Australians. A coalition government will get stalled housing projects moving again. We will invest $5 billion in supporting infrastructure like roads, water, power and sewerage. Yeah. With this support, we will unlock 400,000 new homes for Australians. As I said, we will cut red tape, which will take up to $70,000 off the cost of a new home. But the biggest problem with access to housing is that under Labor, immigration numbers are too high. With Labor having opened the migration floodgates, the dream of home ownership has become a nightmare for so many Australians. Since Labor was elected, it has brought in a record 1.4 million people, about the population of Adelaide. That number accounts for 80% of our population growth over the same period, and that's why there's a shortfall of homes for about 400,000 people. Australians are deeply concerned about the scale and pace of immigration on housing, infrastructure and services. And that includes migrants themselves, who have become Australians. Tonight, I announce a far-reaching and unprecedented housing policy. It's also an immigration policy that puts Australians first. A coalition will cap immigration numbers based on the number of homes constructed each year. Never again will a government be able to bring in more people than our housing can support. That's our commitment. That's our commitment. I also stress this point. Given the magnitude of people coming in under Labor, immigration will need to be significantly below our cap in the first few years of a coalition government. We must allow the housing market to catch up. Only closer to the election can we provide a precise immigration number. It would be rash to do so now because Labor always exceeds its immigration targets. And it will do so again, Mr Speaker. By the next election, the situation could be even worse than it is today. But this much I promise. The coalition will deliver one of the biggest cuts to immigration in the history of this country. Our immigration cut will complement our plan to lift immigration standards. We will make the existing Australian Values Statement an enforceable visa condition. We'll make it an obligation, not an option, for permanent visa holders to learn English. We'll enhance screening to stop radicals from entering our borders. We'll curtail frivolous protection claims by restoring temporary protection visas and establishing a list of safe countries deemed free from persecution. And we will process and deport 70,000 overstayers who have no legal right to stay. Those who criticise the law being enforced must explain why their sympathies lie with illegal overstayers instead of with migrants and Australians who abide by the law. In a dangerous world of coercion, crises and conflict, we need to address threats and risks comprehensively and get serious about our self-reliance. Tonight, I announce that a coalition government will develop a national security strategy and appoint a dedicated national security advisor. Central to that strategy will be defence. Unlike Labor, with its accounting trickery, the coalition will commit to spending at least 3% of GDP on defence. That is what is needed to bolster our ranks of warfighters in this country, to harden our bases, to deliver AUKUS, to build offensive and defensive drones and missiles at speed and scale in an age where such weapons are essential to deter a larger adversary. Energy security will also be a priority in this new strategy. While renewables have a role in our energy mix, especially rooftop solar and home batteries, they aren't a rapid replacement for fossil fuels. Fossil fuels still deliver most of our energy needs. Australia isn't undergoing a rapid, pain-free energy transition as Labor pretends. Australia's energy security requires energy abundance. That's the coalition's goal. So tonight I announce that a coalition government will work with coal-fired power plant owners to keep them running as long and as hard as possible to get electricity prices down. On fuel, the coalition has said we will double our minimum reserves of petrol, diesel and jet fuel to put our total reserves within reach of 90 days. We will also invest $800 million for new fuel storage to give us 1 billion litres of additional capacity. To incentivise more refining capacity, we'll make the Fuel Security Services payment available to companies who can build new refineries. This includes refining of non-conventional fuels, like biofuels and coal-to-liquids. Ultimately, we want decades of fuel reserves and much more energy. We can achieve that by getting Australian resources out of the ground. More Australian gas working hard for Australians. More Australian oil working hard for Australians. To dig and drill, the coalition will remove obstacles. As I said earlier, we will abolish Labor's hidden carbon taxes, like the safeguard mechanism. And we will rewrite Labor's anti-development environmental laws to speed up approvals. We're also going to unlock critical gas and oil projects. We will create, under law, national strategic priority projects. 2 nation-building projects will be immediately designated by a coalition government. The Browse Basin offshore gas field in Western Australia and the Taroom oil field in Queensland. Yeah. The Commonwealth will get out of the way so the states can get projects going. The coalition will also put an end to the green energy rent-seeking. We will back any technologies that can deliver affordable and reliable energy in this country. That includes coal, gas, hydro, batteries and renewables in the right places. And it will include nuclear power too. We will lift the ban. Yeah. To Australians watching tonight, I know you're struggling on many fronts. I know you're apprehensive about yours and your children's future. I know you're worried about the state of our cherished country. But decline isn't inevitable. Damage isn't irreparable. Difficulty isn't insurmountable. We can restore our standard of living. We can protect our way of life. I'm not under any misapprehension. There's much work the coalition must do to win your confidence. But with the policies I've announced tonight and the vision I've outlined, I hope you can begin to believe again. Believe in our promise of better government. Believe in the prospect of a fairer, freer and better Australia. That Australia is worth fighting for, now more than ever. And the fight starts tonight. Yeah.
Welcome back. That was the Opposition Leader Angus Taylor giving his reply to the Albanese government's 5th budget. The Opposition Leader will join me shortly. He's just on his way up from the chamber, but first political editor Jacob Grieber and former Liberal MP Keith Wallahan are here for their reactions. Welcome, Keith, but I'll start with Jacob. A hugely consequential moment for Angus Taylor. Who is that speech directed at?
Yeah, so the fight starts now is how he finished that speech. The question is he throwing punches that land or is he throwing haymakers? There are 2 big, I think, targets. One of them is One Nation, and we heard a lot about the immigration policies that he wants to adopt, throw 70,000 people out of the country and go very, very hard into a new realm, which is targeting folks who are permanent residents but still get 17 categories of welfare. That's number one. Number two is on this big move to index the income tax thresholds. That breaks 40 years or more of bipartisanship on this issue. And it shines a big spotlight onto what is the sleight of hand that sits under so much budgeting. But it's also an extraordinary fiscal straitjacket that he's putting on. It costs a lot of money, and he's going to have to find a lot of money to pay for it.
Let me bring in Keith Wolahan. You were defeated in a heartland Liberal seat. Listening to that speech, is that a leader who makes you want to come back into Parliament to win a seat and serve alongside?
I thought that was an excellent speech, and the greatest honour of my life was serving in the Parliament. We'll wait and see whether I can and would run again, and that's for the people of Australia to decide who represents them in the Parliament. I thought that was a Liberal speech. I thought it was a Liberal speech focused on aspiration and on guardrails for a proportionately sized government. The size of government has become disproportionate in Australia, and so that bold statement on indexing tax, that is a lesson to government to stay within its means. And then to link migration to housing, I think that's sensible, because when you have incentives for government as well as the private sector to improve the lives of Australians, I think those are consistent with Liberal values, they're consistent with aspiration, and they speak to two Australias. At the moment, we see regional Australia have particular concerns and Metro Australia have particular concerns. I thought this budget in reply speech spoke to both.
At the same time, the Liberal Party has obviously suffered considerably since you lost your seat, Keith Wolahan. One Nation's on an extraordinary march. The polls that we expect to see, they've been bad. We think they're getting worse. It's a very different party in a sense, in a different position to the one that you left. What about the efforts in that speech to talk to Liberal voters who are telling pollsters right now that their vote is going with One Nation?
I think if the Liberal Party speaks to mainstream Australia, whether you're regional or metro, and speaks on economics mostly, because that's where people are hurting, then they don't have to speak out of both sides of their mouth. They get to speak to both Australias and bring them together in a unifying way. There is no denying that there has been a massive increase in third-party votes. Massive. It's totally changed since when I was in Parliament. But I think part of that is a distrust in the major parties. And there's an onus on the major parties to not feed into that. And so I think the broken promises from the other night, they feed into that. I think the expected, dog whistle attack that will come to Angus Taylor on this, that feeds into that. It can't be that the government can reduce net overseas migration and that's okay, but then the opposition talks about it and that's a dog whistle. We must be able to have these conversations and not impugn the motives of those who say them.
Keith Wolahan, it's Jacob Grieber here. I know you've been watching the government's budget closely. Tonight we heard Angus Taylor confirm that he would repeal those changes to capital gains tax and negative gearing. Is there a risk there for the Liberal Party that you alienate those young Australians who are struggling to buy their first home?
No doubt that housing is the number one issue in Australia, particularly metropolitan Australia. I'm here in Sydney for work. And when you look at birth rates between 2019 and 2024, they dropped by 9.4% in this city. In my home city of Melbourne, they dropped by 8.2%. The housing crisis isn't just material. It is about family, and young Australians, particularly millennials, feel like both parties don't speak to them. That said, I understand that supply is the most important lever. And to the credit of the government and also to Angus Taylor tonight, both offered supply boosting policies. To the policies on tax, of course the government should be hit on the head for breaking a promise. Of course they should. The people always get it right at election, but I can be pretty sure that there would be less seats on the government side if they had put those policies to the people. They lied to the Australian people, and that has broken trust with the Australian people. So Angus Taylor is right to hold them to account for breaking that promise. That said, supply is important, but I also think the mix between investors and those who are looking to buy a home is an issue that matters too. When you look at investment loans in Australia last year, 82% went to existing stock. I think it's a good thing to shift those incentives for new supply.
As Jacob said when he's giving his first reaction to that speech, we've got this very bold move, which is the indexation move on taxation. Now, obviously, governments of both stripes have resisted this for a long time because of the straitjacket that it puts on them. Were you surprised that this was the big rabbit that Angus Taylor pulled out of the hat?
I was pleasantly surprised. That is putting the onus of keeping the budgets responsible on government. What we see is this pantomime that happens decade after decade where both parties, they will increase taxes through a thief in the night, to use the metaphor, where your tax bracket goes up through inflation, and then they say, ta-da, we'll give some of that back to you, and you should feel happy about that. I think this says that this is your money and that it is the government that has to live within its means, and it's a bold thing to do, and I'm really proud that Angus Taylor did it.
Now, just a small point, this was one of the, if there were two centrepieces maybe on immigration and on the indexing of taxes, Angus Taylor didn't quite deliver his line right on that, Jacob. He'll be disappointed on that particular line, saying $2.50 instead of $2.50. These are very tough nights. The pressure is on. Is that what we saw?
Look, there was a fumble there, and they'll be upset that they can't clip up that piece of the video. He said that when this indexation begins in the first year, it's worth $2.50. It's actually $250 is the number he meant to say. As you say, when the lights are on, it gets tricky. But I think that number is important because it's about the same as the WATO, the Working Australian Tax Offset that was announced. And that grows according to Angus Taylor's office calculation to $1,000. But yeah. That's life in the spotlight.
So, Keith Wallahan, we're very close to wrapping up here, but does watching this speech make you miss it more or miss it less, just briefly?
I always miss it. I'm enjoying more time with my family, and I really enjoy being a barrister. I'm working on really interesting matters. But there's no greater honour than to serve your country. I got to do it in uniform. I got to do it in the Parliament. I think I'm still young. We'll see what happens in the future.
Keith Wallahan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate it. And the opposition leader is just a few minutes away. But first, just a quick look at the response and fallout from the government's budget delivered on Tuesday night as a reminder.
Tonight's federal budget has been promised as the most ambitious but most responsible from the Albanese government.
People will make their own judgment about that, but I genuinely hope that they see that we've had fairness at the centre.
We'll limit negative gearing for residential property to new builds from July next year. And we're replacing the 50% capital gains tax discount with inflation-adjusted indexation.
The government's economic duo spending some political capital.
Election promises taken out with the garbage.
Yes, I acknowledge that the government's come to a different view about some really important policy areas.
The coalition has already vowed to roll them back if elected.
We absolutely don't support the assault on aspiration in this budget.
These geniuses are going to go to an election saying that they will repeal young Australians getting a fair go.
I see this as nothing but communism taking over and redistributing wealth.
13 million workers to get $250 back at tax time from 2028.
Every time the government puts forward a measure like that, it's outstripped by inflation.
We provide as much tax relief as we can afford to do, as we can responsibly do.
To pay for it, deep cuts. $35 billion from the NDIS.
Labor's budget is a devastating blow for disabled people and our families.
It still sucks to be poor, it sucks to be old.
Angus Taylor will make a bold play to win back voters in tonight's budget reply speech, vowing a future coalition government would automatically index income brackets.
That's a very expensive plan.
No matter how hard people work, they don't feel like they're getting ahead, they don't feel hard work pays off.
Labor promised not to change housing taxes, yet it misled. Labor promised not to change investment taxes, yet it deceived.
The member for Hume promised that they'd be better off if they made him leader.
The Leader of the Opposition, Angus Taylor, joins me now. Angus Taylor, congratulations on your budget in reply. There is, as we know, a one nation wave sweeping through Liberal-held electorates, extinction level according to the polls. Are you laying out your plan tonight to stop their momentum?
No, Sarah, and thank you for having me. I'm laying out our plan for Australia, for our nation, at a time when the standard of living is going backwards. People are deeply worried about the direction of the country. They're deeply worried about their own incomes and their families and their future. And so that's why we've laid out a pathway for a fairer, freer, better Australia, one with lower taxes, one that's not got an assault on aspiration like we see under Labor, but supports aspiration with significant tax cuts, not just getting rid of Labor's toxic taxes, but I think the very worst tax of all, which is the one that goes up every single year because of inflation. And that is a big impost on Australians. It's holding them back. And we will get rid of it. We'll also align immigration with housing, get housing supply up, but make sure immigration numbers are such that we can support them with housing. And we'll make sure that we've got affordable, abundant energy and we put Australians first. That's the focus.
All right. There are clearly two twin key concerns here. Tax, which we'll come to, on immigration first of all, because we are having this conversation with that cloud of one nation hanging over the Liberal Party. Why the attack on permanent residents in this speech who work and pay tax the same as citizens? Well,
it's about putting Australian citizens first. And that's the duty of a government, to put Australian citizens first. And I think it's extraordinary that at a time like this, the government has cut support for older Australians' private health insurance, and yet there is welfare for non-Australian citizens. Sarah,
just to be clear, these are permanent residents who pay tax and in many cases are waiting to become citizens. So why focus on them?
Well, citizenship is a privilege. And it's something we want people to get something from. If you contribute to this country, we want to contribute back. And that's what citizenship is all about. But when you have a situation where someone can come and get all the benefits without that, it becomes meaningless, Sarah. And the truth is, if you ask Australians whether people can get access to welfare programs without being citizens, they'd say they can't, but they actually are, and it's costing the country a great deal. So this is 17 different programs. There's appropriate exemptions in compassionate circumstances, but importantly, it's saying that we're going to put Australian citizens first, not rip money out of private health insurance for older Australians or veterans.
These measures for migrants, as you say, they are about focusing on the idea of citizenship, pushing people, if you like, towards citizenship. However, for some countries, particularly people from China and India, in order to become Australian citizens, they have to renounce their Indian or Chinese citizenship. And there are grave concerns amongst people in that community that they would lose assets. Now, what's your message to the very large Indian and Chinese diaspora this evening, listening to you saying that you will force them to give up their citizenship if they want to receive any of these welfare benefits? You want them to give up those citizenships and potentially lose their assets. What's your message to them?
We're not forcing anyone to give up anything, Sarah. We're saying that if you want access to the privileges of which we believe should be privileges of citizenship, you need to become a citizen. So you need to make a choice. It's very simple. And the idea that someone should arrive and the moment they arrive here get access to family tax benefit, for instance, I think for Australians, that's just not on at a time like this when we're really struggling. We were approaching $1 trillion of debt under Labor. Australians are struggling with their own household budgets. We're seeing cutbacks, extra taxes being imposed on housing, on savings, on farmers.
I was asking you to address your answer to that specific group of people, the Chinese and the Indian diasporas, because obviously, at the last election, the Liberal Party suffered significant losses in those communities. They felt there had been intemperate attacks on them. So it makes me wonder how bad the threat must feel from one nation to risk angering those communities again.
Sarah, I welcome those communities who come to this country and want to build businesses and build careers and do things in our country and become Australians. That's the pathway. I mean, I grew up in one of the great immigrant towns of Australia, not far south of here, where we saw thousands of people come to that town, Cooma, after the Second World War, and it was an extraordinary place to grow up. But what it made it so extraordinary was the people who came wanted to be part of our country. They wanted to become Australians. That's the model of immigration and citizenship that I want to see.
The group of people that you're talking about, as I said, these are tax-paying permanent residents, many of whom are waiting to become citizens. They already face a 2 or 4 year waiting period for welfare as things stand. Why do you want to further penalise that group by restricting access to welfare completely?
Sarah, access to citizenship comes after 4 years of being here and only 1 year of permanent residency. This is not a high threshold. So the real issue is this. It's true that
you are proposing to take welfare away from people in that group at that time, in a period of global competition for skilled migrants. Have you modelled how many skilled migrants might leave Australia because of the conditions you want to create?
Well, Sarah, there's always a long queue of people wanting to come to this country. It's because it's, I believe, the greatest country on earth. But if people come to this country in order to receive welfare in the first couple of years of being here, perhaps that's not an appropriate circumstance.
When you say in order to, are you suggesting they come here to get the welfare?
But at the end of the day, Sarah, it's appropriate that people come here, spend some time and become a citizen over time, and then they get access to the privileges of citizenship. That's how most countries in the world work. It's completely appropriate that we should do the same. And this is, look, the extraordinary thing about this is how many Australians have said to me in recent weeks, as I've been talking to people about this, I had no idea that non-citizens could get access to 17 of these welfare programs soon after they arrive in the country. Now, we have a very generous welfare system in this country, a very generous safety net, social safety net, and that's appropriate. But it's also appropriate
to take it away from permanent residents who are planning lives, careers, families in Australia, contributing to Australia.
We are not taking anything away from anyone, Sarah. This will be grandfathered. We've been very clear about that. So that's actually incorrect. It is grandfathered. And once you become a citizen, you get full access to those programs.
You promised one of the biggest cuts to immigration in Australia's history was the language that you used. A statement as bold as that demands a number.
Sure.
What's your number?
Well, what you will see from our number is a cut of more than 70% since the peak under Labor.
That's
more than 40%.
That's 150,000. Is that your number?
Can I answer the question?
Please.
I'm trying. 40% on the current level. And the truth is the right number will depend on how many houses get built. I mean, this is the whole problem. This government thought that they could pick the right number without knowing how many houses that were going to get built. And the truth is, not enough houses have been built for the numbers they set.
We're talking about a statement that you made in your speech tonight, and I say that having asked you a couple of questions about One Nation. One of the biggest cuts to immigration in Australia's history. As I said, a statement as bold as that requires a number to be put next to it. Otherwise, it's a slogan. Your maths on the numbers you just referred to is 150,000. Is that your planned net overseas migration number?
Sarah, I've given you those numbers, and I don't know who's done those calculations for you, but the truth is,
saying that's wrong?
The truth is that we had immigration at 550,000 under this government. 550,000. Before that, that's where it peaked. And so we need to get down to a number.
With settings, we've discussed this before, those were settings put in place by your government.
This is the sort of nonsense this government...
This is a question about numbers.
I'd really like to finish, Sarah.
Yes.
This is nonsense.
I'd like you to answer the question about numbers.
I will, and I'm answering the question, but you've just got to give me a go to answer it. This is complete nonsense you hear from this government. Absolute, utter nonsense. They were the government, and the peak got to 550,000 people. There is no way in this country that houses could support that number. The two numbers have to be linked. And so what we're proposing is each year the housing minister would say, we've got this many houses available, and so the right number, or the cap, should be an appropriate number to suit that. Now, we know already, based on what we are seeing, that that number is likely to be 70% down from the peak, roughly 40% down from where we are now. And I said, we've got some catch-up to do too, because frankly what's happened is Labor has failed so miserably on their housing targets and been so far above their immigration targets that we've got to get catch-up.
Right,
this will allow young Australians to get into a home, Sarah, and that is the most important objective we have here.
I'd like to note you've made a big statement in your speech. You're not prepared to back it up with numbers, even though you know...
I've just given you the numbers.
Well, you haven't given me the final.
Well, Sarah, I've said what the number will be. It will be based on the number of houses that are built. Now, I'll ask you, well, if I may, how many houses will Labor build in a couple of years' time? If I was to guess...
You can put those questions to Labor. Let me ask you a different question. Let's move on. If you're going to make a very substantial cut, which you have signalled very clearly in your speech tonight, and on the numbers that you have given me, we're calculating that at about 150,000 as your total number. So you only have a small number of levers available to you to cut the net overseas migration number. Cutting international students, working holiday visas, which the Nationals oppose, and New Zealanders. So which of those levers are you going to pull to make a massive cut in immigration?
Well, Sarah, as I said, we'll give a number in the lead up to the next election.
This is about...
I've given the principle. Well, if I can finish, I've given you a very clear principle. It will be a very substantial reduction because there is no way that the government is going to get their housing completions up to a level that's going to give a bigger number than that.
This is a
It will be, if I may answer, it will be below 200,000. There's no doubt about that. And then the right mix will depend on the circumstances at the time. What is clear is that the number of students in this country has been at record levels. This government lost control of that situation.
So you will be targeting international students.
I'm just saying that that's one area that is obvious for us to look at. There's no question about it.
Will you exclude working holiday visas?
Well, as I say, the number of temporary visas has increased dramatically under this government, and that's been part of the housing crisis.
So working holiday visas are also on the table?
I'm saying temporary visas obviously is a big part of the explosion.
Does that include working holiday visas?
Well, as I say, Sarah, we will lay out the individual visa numbers as we get close to the election. The process we have laid out is that as we see the housing completions, we'll set a cap, and then the visa numbers will fit within that cap.
How do you put a hard cap on net overseas migration when it includes Australian citizens who are free to come and go?
Well, you can make reasonable predictions about what those things are going to be, Sarah.
So if you can forecast, so if you can forecast, then you probably already have in your head some idea of how those numbers are going to break down.
Well, Sarah, what we don't know is how many houses we're going to get. And what I do know about this government is they've completely failed to reach their housing targets time and time again. So we will see what they deliver on that. They're sitting on around 170,000 now. That's well below the numbers that we saw when we were in government. They have completely failed to meet their own housing targets. We're on about 70,000 houses a year less than they should be getting to on their own targets, and we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of years. But I tell you one thing I'm not going to do. I am not going to allow the net overseas migration get to a number which is beyond the housing we have in this country.
I want to move on to tax indexation, noting that we don't have any numbers from you after that bold statement. But on tax indexation, this is a big move. This is something that tax experts around the country have wanted for a very long time. No side of politics has wanted to do this. You've decided to do it. So what will it cost the budget's bottom line over those 4 years?
Well, the biggest thing is what it's going to cost hardworking Australians. So I do want to start here because this is important. What you will see from bracket creep is in the first year, $250 at the target inflation rate, 2.5%.
Just on that, are you going to, would you repeal the WATO, the new tax that the government's brought in?
We've said we'll support that initiative. We've said that. But the fact of the matter is it goes from $250 for a typical earner, someone on about $70,000, $500, $750, $1,000. This is the thief in the night, Sarah. This is actually how Labor generates revenues. It raises taxes on people, and the higher inflation goes, the higher the number. Those numbers double if inflation's sitting at the current level at 5%. So it is true that there is a cost to that.
And
that's absolutely right.
And what is that cost?
Well, you know,
it
will depend on the inflation rate. And here we go into the same problem.
What do you forecast? You can give me a figure with some plus and minus in it. What do you forecast that number to be?
Well, the inflation rate right now is running at double the target inflation rate. What will it be running in a couple of years? Let's see. But I'll tell you where the savings are going to come from.
Now, hold on. Just give me a number for how much indexing tax will cost the budget bottom line.
Well, it'll be what is necessary to alleviate those numbers that I just described
Angus
to you.
Taylor, how do you restore your economic credentials if you won't put a number on a massive new policy that you're presenting?
The number will depend on the inflation rates we see closer to the election, and we will put our costings closer to the election. But I tell you one thing, Sarah.
Well, we've done some rough calculations on that. And
well, if you want to give me advice on the numbers, go right ahead.
No, they're not my advice, but I'm asking you to confirm that this is correct. The number we've come up with is 20.5 billion over 4 years, growing very fast. In the fourth year, 11.8 billion. So 11.8 billion by 2030, a cost of $22.5 billion. Is that right?
So why did you need to ask me the question?
I wanted to know what number you came up with.
So we can argue about this all day, and we might have different. We might have different numbers. I think what matters is whether there are savings there to pay for it. That's the question.
Well, and how much it is matters to you, Angus Taylor.
It's true, but it will depend on the numbers you use and the inflation.
You are coming to the Australian people tonight to re-establish your position as the leader of a would-be government. Central to that are your economic credentials. That is the person that you have put forward tonight. So you can tell us how much it's going to be and how you're going to pay for it.
And I've told you again, it will depend on the inflation rate at the time. I don't know how many times I can say that to you.
It's a question of trust.
And then the question is this. How do you pay for it? And there's 4 areas we've been very clear about, and I was very clear about today. And this is the crucial point. Ending the corporate welfare that Labor has been pursuing. We've seen endless amounts of this with their National Reconstruction Fund, their so-called Future Made in Australia that's sending industry offshore, ending the housing bureaucracy, the Housing Australia Future Fund, ending the net zero bureaucracy, the climate bureaucracy that this government has created.
You laid out all these elements in the speech tonight. We're at the time where we have to wrap. I know we don't have your numbers, but you've made some bold statements in your speech tonight. There'll be much discussion. I look forward to having you confirm.
You will get our numbers closer to the election, and that is the convention, and you know it.
Angus Taylor, thank you very much indeed.
Good to be with you.
In less than 12 months, One Nation has doubled its national primary vote. It now regularly outpolls the opposition, as I put to Angus Taylor a few moments ago, most strikingly, of course, in last week's Farrer by-election. According to One Nation leader Pauline Hanson, the competition has seen the coalition adopt One Nation's policy ideas.
Do you think he's just taking his policies from a One Nation type?
Oh, I don't think I know he is. Even his housing, he's going to relate back to housing. If you look at his housing policy, which he's saying, it brings you smack bang on the 130,000 a year. And that's what I've said right from the beginning, 130,000 a year into the country until we clean up our own backyard. Then you review it and see if we bring in more migrants. And another policy he's picked up of mine is the 8 years before you get citizenship. I've been speaking about that for years. It's another one of our policy. The difference is that Angus Taylor has no vision for the future, and that's why he's picking up One Nation's policies. I'm the only one that's been speaking about vision for the future. I have been consistent for the past 30 years.
One Nation's Barnaby Joyce joins me now. I presume you were watching that in the chamber. I didn't see your face. Has Angus Taylor done anything to steal the march back from One Nation tonight?
Well, I think they should acknowledge One Nation policies past, present and emerging. It's very important, and I'd like to thank them for basically reading off the One Nation script. Look, it was I never run a person to the dirt. You know, it was a fair effort, and obviously it's game on, isn't it? And that's what this is about. Politics is game on.
We were just discussing one of the statements there. So there's the Angus Taylor saying they're going to make the biggest cut to immigration, one of the biggest cuts ever seen in Australia. They want to change the policy for permanent residents and their access to welfare. These are both policies close to yours. But have you ever seen the coalition in your time in politics pushed so far to the right on immigration as they appear to be now?
No. No, I mean, but the circumstances, circumstances in Australia have changed, and I think everybody, even the Labor Party, are accepting that dynamic. I think the Australian people they don't want to see the egalitarian nature that we have that works within strong guardrails, and that becomes between people of all creeds, all sexualities, and they feel a threat to that. They feel uncomfortable about where it's off to, and they're demanding of governments of all ilks to give them a sense of security.
Just on a personal matter, if they had adopted immigration policies like these, would you have stayed with the coalition?
It was beyond that, Sarah. It was, unfortunately, I don't sort of want to
No, I don't want to revisit that, but I just want to know if that makes you reconsider.
At that time, my relationship with the leadership of the National Party completely disintegrated. It was neither becoming of me nor of the people that I was dealing with for me to hang around. And also, my biggest issue then would have been on a policy basis, climate policy, which was absolutely decimating New England because of the renewable energy zones that were being foisted on us to assuage the virtue of people who never actually had to live.
Right, let's go back to Angus Taylor's speech, because one of the discussions we were having just now is around cuts to immigration.
Yep.
You have policies too on reducing the number. How your policy has a number attached to it. But what I wanted to understand from him was which levers he was going to pull in immigration, and I didn't get a straight answer on that. How do you target those low net overseas migration numbers with very large cuts in them, as you have, as the Liberal Party now is, without pulling a lever on skilled migration?
Well, I think that, as what we've said all the way along, we look at a stock take of what Australia can absorb. As we know, we've been bringing in about the population of Canberra a year. It's sort of waned a little bit lately, but we just didn't have the houses, we didn't have the schools, we certainly didn't have the dams, we didn't have the universities, we didn't have the hospitals. And as Australian people were waiting in emergency departments and, finding...
I'm going to ask you the same question that I pressed Angus Taylor on. How are you pulling, which lever are you pulling? Where are you getting your very large cuts in net overseas migration from? There's only a few places it can come from.
So what you do is you see the requirements that you have. If it's boilermakers, if it's fitters and turners, for which, for instance, they say builders, a very small portion of our immigration is a tiny portion is builders that come in.
Not what the Master Builders Association says.
Well,
migration has been central to the success of the construction industry.
But only a very small portion of the total immigration are registered qualified builders, okay? And that is just a fact. So if builders is what you need, then when you go for a visa to come to Australia, then builders are what we are looking for. If it's a boilermaker, then boilermaker is what we are looking for. We have to be more stringent in our assessment of what those visa categories are, and also, of course, and this is where One Nation will sort of annoy people, is if we believe that you're coming from an area of the world that is febrile, that there is a higher potential of the problems there becoming part of Australia's problems. Well, we don't want those problems, and so they're precluded from coming forward.
That's the Liberal Party's bad countries notion. Let's not relitigate that. The question I was trying to get at is, where are you making your cuts? Because there are only a few places you can cut net overseas migration. Well, overseas students, skilled migration. You know what the categories are.
Well,
I
think within the policy document we see that we feel that there's a lot of so-called students that arrive in Australia and not actually students. So that would be an area where we certainly would be a lot more forensic in our assessment, because if you're coming here as a student, that is not low-skilled jobs around Sydney.
All right, let's talk about what happens next. If One Nation's rise continues on the trajectory that it's on at the moment, would One Nation work with the Liberals as a junior party in coalition?
Okay.
Things are changing fast, are they not?
Yeah, well, the polls tonight, and I'm not hubristic, this is the polls tonight, it has us leading the Labor Party. So what we would do is we would offer supply and confidence to people who would take on board our policy structure. We do not want the prizes, we do not want the ministries. So you can keep all the prizes, but there'll be certain policy outcomes, for instance, scrapping the Climate Change Department or climate change policy and reallocating those resources to where they better suit Australia. And if you don't want to contend with our policy requirements, then I suppose you get your fate tested in Parliament on a regular basis. We don't want that. That would be chaotic. So yes, we're quite prepared to work, but not to the extent of a coalition, because that presumes that you're in cabinet and everything like that. No, we would have our policy requirements that we believe best for Australia. Then we don't have to worry about cabinet solidarity. It's quite a clear-cut deal. And you and the Fourth Estate will see that deal.
And just very briefly to wrap up, do you think that Angus Taylor has stopped the flow towards you tonight with his speech? In brief.
No.
No, that's a no from Barnaby Joyce. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's the programme for this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your company during this intense and fascinating budget week from Canberra. Lots more analysis to follow in the weeks ahead. But for now, good night.